Hello and welcome to the Extreme History Project Lecture Series. My name is Crystal Alegria and I'm the director of the Extreme History Project, a nonprofit located right here in Bozeman, Montana. And our mission is to make history relevant. And we do that in a lot of different ways, but one of our favorite ways is with this lecture series that we are doing this evening. Our lecture series is in its 11th year in 2022, so we're pretty excited about that. I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsor for the lecture tonight, Vicki York. Thank you so much, Vicki, for sponsoring this lecture. Vicki has been a supporter of Extreme History for many years, is a volunteer with us. She helps run our used book room at the Extreme History Project headquarters. So thanks so much, Vicki, for all your support, and thanks for your support of this lecture about the Story Mansion this evening. I have a few housekeeping tips before we begin. We are in webinar format, so you can see us, you can see us and hear us, hopefully, but we can't hear you. So if you have questions, please write those in the question and answer box that you can access at the bottom of the screen. If you have thoughts and comments, you can use the chat button, also located at the bottom of your screen. At the end of Felix's presentation this evening, you can ask questions and I will read them out for Felix at the end. So thanks to everyone out there for your support of the Extreme History Project. If you enjoy this lecture series, our walking tours that we're going to be starting up here in a couple of months, our workshops and our other programming, please consider supporting the Extreme History Project financially. It really helps us bring history to you in fun and engaging ways. Cheryl, who's out there, I hope, Cheryl, if you could put the link to our donation page in the chat box, or just go to our website and make a donation, we would sure appreciate it. Or if you live in Bozeman and are downtown, come and visit us at our location, which is at 234 East Mendenhall Street. Our offices are located in a historic building on Mendenhall that has a white stucco exterior. So come and visit us sometime. And we'd love to have your financial support. We are a grassroots organization funded by our community, which is, of course, all of you out there tonight. So thanks in advance for your support. We really do truly appreciate it. We are so excited to have Dr. Felix Spinelli with us this evening to talk about our beloved Story Mansion. Felix Spinelli is a retired senior economist with the USDA. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Minnesota, a master's degree from the University of Tennessee, and a PhD from Purdue University, all degrees in agricultural economics. His work with the USDA focused on food, agricultural, and natural resource issues in the US with international work assignments in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific Rim. He has taught micro and macro economics in schools around the DC area and even participated in a course on historic preservation. That has come in handy now, huh, Felix? He is currently the president of the nonprofit Friends of the Story Mansion. And if you haven't ever checked out their website, the Friends of the Story Mansion's website, make sure and do that in the next few days. They've got a great website going and they have a lot of events coming up at the Story Mansion. So Felix, welcome. I'm so glad you're here tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Crystal. And it's such a delight to be able to speak to you today. Get my cell phone out of here. It's beeping at me already. As you can see, I've entitled my presentation, This Old House, Its Origins and New Beginnings. And as Crystal said, I'm a retired economist, so beware. My point of view is from an economic point of view, from a restoration kind of utilization bent. And I was trained to be impartial and take a critical view on the facts at hand. And I've tried to do that in my research on this project. And I will try to identify the sources of my information, and I hope they're as accurate as they possibly can, and acknowledge some of the nice people that have helped me along the way. So I'm going to break my talk here, and hopefully it's going to be about 30 to 40 minutes, so I'll have time here for your questions and comments. into three parts. The first part is the historical past, the events, the when, where, who, how of the Story Mansion, how it came about. That's older than 100 years old. The recent past, which is 90 years old and less and up to about 20 years ago. And so that includes some of the people in our ages on our board, which we just love. We love to have that institutional memory. And then finally, the living past, what happened in the last 20 years, and a glimpse into the future. And we're about at the same place we were about 20 years ago, I would say, with this quote here from Todd Wilkinson. The city has given the community the opportunity to help seal the fate of the mansion. And we are still trying to do that. And we need all the help we can get. And I hope you're as excited as I am about this prospect, because I think it's a real tremendous resource for our community. All right, so let's set the stage here a little bit. There's two things I want you to take away from this map. And that's the Spanish coming in from the west, and the French from the north, and the English, and everyone else that could have jumped in here, the European powers. And as a friend of mine once told me, you can look at this map and you could capsulize it in 6 words. Knock, knock, it's me, Europe. And it was a land grab. And that's what was going on at that time. The second thing I want you to take away from this map, 1774. Guess what? The Stories, their ancestors, the ones that are here, that wound up in Bozeman, were already here for over 100 years. They had arrived in 1641 and had a very interesting history. I've looked into it, and I recommend John Russell's book on the Treasure State Tycoon to get into it, and then I've got some other sources that I relied on too. But here we are, 1774, a long time ago, land grab going on, knock knock, who's there? It's me, Europe, and we've got the Stories already here for 100 years. Let's see what happens in only 9 years. Now, we think Bozeman is undergoing rapid development. Look at this map. Yeah, the Stories are up there in New Hampshire, but look at how wide and how fast in 9 years that land was claimed. This is incredible. This is the first state map of the U.S. Let's look at another map. This map brings us up to 1850. Now, what's interesting in this map? Well, not much is going out where we live, is it? Looks pretty blank. Matter of fact, most people refer to the area where we live here in Bozeman as montaña. It's a Spanish word for mountainous region. That's where we get our name. Where are the Stories? They're in New Hampshire? Yes, some of them were. But they had already moved west into Ohio, where Nelson Story Sr., the father of the character that we're going to focus in today, TB, who built our TB mansion, or his name is Byron, Thomas Byron or Byron. The father is in Ohio. He's born in 1838. And he has a storied background. Excuse the pun. There's perhaps too many puns in this presentation, but if, you know, you can try to avoid those. I can't. But anyway, we're here, 1850. Not much is going on out there in Montana land. Let's see what happens in 25 years. Whoa! This is what Bozeman looked like. A little bit different than it does today. That's 1875. Now, I promise you, every slide that I present today will have some relationship with the mansion. And this map is related to the mansion because it's the same year that TB or Byron's mama, Ellen, who is his mother, is in her little belly. So this is the first known picture that I could find of TB, and he didn't even know he was getting his photo taken. Now, back in the day, they used to say, when maybe vulgarly, that if a woman was pregnant, they'd say that she had a bun in the oven. In this case, she's got a bine in the oven. Excuse the pun. I couldn't help it. So that's 1875. 1876, 1 year later, there's little Bine on her mother's lap. And who do we have there? There's Nelson Story, that stern guy with that beard. To his left is Rose, and the little guy is Nelson Jr., or Bud they would call him. What's interesting too on this is that Bine, TB, was not born in Bozeman. He was born in Washington, D.C., 1876, and we have what I've been reading. They went there to see the Centennial Building, and if you've ever been to the National Mall, stop in to see that huge building, all the technology when the United States was 100 years old. But he was also defending himself on some legal matters on embezzlement. So here we are. We have a little family getting started, and everything is rosy, but for the settlers, but maybe not so rosy for the indigenous population, because just a few years after that picture was taken in 1879, we see that by order of Ulysses S. Grant, the president, he had deeded or patented almost 140 acres to William White Alderson, who we'll hear a little bit about, of land in Bozeman, which encompasses this area around where the Story Mansion is today. So for an economist like myself, we see that this is a huge transfer of wealth to an individual. And here's what this individual looks like. So he was an Englishman, early newsman in the area, and he was definitely in the right place at the right time. So huge subsidy or welfare payment, however you want to look at it, from economist point of view, a huge transfer of wealth and away from the indigenous population. Now, you may have partook in an earlier presentation by Crystal. She gave a good talk on women's suffrage, and it would be one of his daughter-in-laws, Mary, who is recognized as one of the leading people in our community back in the day for women's suffrage. Interesting family. I took a detour there. It's a real tempting thing here when you're doing this kind of research to take tangents, and I'm going to try to avoid that. But I want to get to a point here where this guy Alderson, then a few years later, 7 years later, he sells his property to Hoffman. Hoffman gets it to Lewis. Lewis is a developer from Butte. It's actually called the Butte Addition up there. And there's a series of transfers. And so if you go down to the courthouse, you can go through all those records. The people down there are just fantastic. I want to have a shout out to Mary and Kathy, who helped me go through all those heavy books and run through the records, and find out that there was really 26 lots on that one block, which encompasses the mansion, 26 running along Central Avenue, which would become Wilson Avenue. And oh God, let me shut this down. Too much technology here for an old man. So we had 26 lots in that area, and that's going to be interesting here in a minute, and we'll tell you about that. So we have a series of sales from Alderson to the developers, and about the same time, this is what how Bozeman looked like. So development was spreading, and this was, look back at what the Main Street looked like in 1875. This is not that long afterwards. So it's really it's really remarkable how fast the development, and of course the railroads were coming in. The, soon the Yellowstone Park would be recognized. It was all a really big boost. Fort Ellis, well, if you're familiar with the history of the area, really there's a lot of undercurrent here that really helped this family out. And they were in the right place at the right time too, but they had the right kinds of skills too to capitalize on that. So about that time, this is just 1 year later in 1890, here we have Nelson and Ellen at the far right, and they have their children there. Rose is a bigger gal there. She would be wedded pretty soon in 1890, late 1890s. We have Nelson, he's growing up there in the middle. Walter, I'm sorry, in between um, Nelson Sr. and then the little guy, Walter. He's the youngest one and probably the most interesting of the pack that I could figure out. He became a general in the Army, and out west he's very successful. But that's another tangent that we're trying to avoid. So we have the little guy, Walter, and then TB or Bine is sitting there next to his mom there. So we have the three of them there. Let's see, yeah, three boys and a girl. Okay, so 1890. They've already lived in the big mansion for 2 years. So let's see what happens here. Well, 1890 comes rolling around. The old man Nelson, and I'm gonna take a couple of detours here, because if you're not familiar with Nelson Story Sr. and Ellen, they're a remarkable couple. And I always hate to just focus in on the males here, because the females were pretty incredible too. And luckily, Martha Drysdale's daughter's written a paper on Ellen, and then there's some other sources that I've come across, and they were very interesting individuals and very strong-willed people. But the old man had got into milling here. We can see the Bozeman Milling Company. He had the next year after this picture was taken, he got a spur. He financed his own 1 mile spur out of Bozeman into that mill, and you can see some of the old trestles that he put in and the whole bit out there. And old Nelson was into a little bit of everything, banking and milling, and geez, when you look back in that history, and again, I recommend strongly John Russell's book on the Treasure State Tycoon. That really was my compass in a lot of this research. And why was I interested in it? I'm interested in this because this builds up the capital base that's going to serve this family for generations. And I would have loved to better track how that all happened. And I'll tell you a little bit about it, just as a tangent, because as an economist, I'm tempted in this area. But Nelson Sr. left Ohio on his own after his mom died a few years before. He took off, and his dad, about a year before he took off, and had gotten remarried, and that the remarriage didn't go good, and then the dad died. This was all before he was 19 years old, and he had lost 4 siblings, and that's a pretty rough kind of go to a start. So he set off for out west. He wound up working in Kansas, clearing brush and breaking ground, sod for Ellen's father, and that's how we met Ellen in Kansas. They went out west. They went into Montana in 1863. He struck gold. There's a whole storyline there. Got that money, went down to Texas, brought up longhorns. And if you're not familiar with that story, again, pick up a copy of John Russell's book. It is a good read, and there's a lot of material in that thing. But it created a base of capital here that would be useful for this family, and especially Bine, as we'll see here. So, whoops, so what happened? about 1898, he's married to Kate, and has a nice wedding. Uh, Gets a job as a bookkeeper here at his dad's mill. The next year he becomes president and makes some money. I'm sure his dad helped him out, and uh, according to the census, Kate and Byron lived close near the mill, it said. So I think he was ready for a real place to set off some roots. So he goes to our area where the mansion is, and he buys up that whole block for $3,230. And again, I thank the people down at the courthouse. They're a wonderful group. I've been to the National Archives in Washington, and they are right up there with that group in my estimation. Very helpful, very knowledgeable. I really enjoyed this work, but of course I started at a rural bank in Minnesota, so I used to go through deeds and check out liens and things like this. So I enjoy this stuff. So I'm kind of weird along those lines. So he has this lot, but what are you going to do with a lot like that? Well, you're going to do a lot. No, another pun. I'm sorry. He builds a house, and that's the mansion back in 1910, Carriage House. And in between those two, there's a house that still stands there, and there's a friend of our friends of the story there, Bill, and well, Kathy. He's married to Kathy Reynolds, who got raised in there, in the Reynolds family that you may know. And you can see the entryway going in the carriage, the little carport there, or carriage port, I guess it was said. And we see the layout. Quite a house, quite a house. And I've always wondered, was it a sign of conspicuous consumption? Did he just have money coming out of his, just flowing, or what was the deal here? Well, he might have had an idea that his brother was going to buy the mansion across the way, kitty corner. This was the Fisher house, and his brother had Nelson, or Bud, bought that in 1913. It would become a fraternity that still is there today, and still the same orientation, even though this mansion got knocked down in '61 to put the new structure in. And the Sigma Chi's, we'll have a little running narrative on them and this other group here, but we don't want to jump the gun too much. Or what could he tried to compete with his dad, who built this place 1886, and it was completed in 1888. Here's Main Street, and the dirt roads had running water from the campus there. There's where the duck pond is, if you want to see some interesting engineering. But it was quite an edifice, and outstanding building in its day. Unfortunately got knocked down, but I don't want to go into all of that tangent. So let's turn back to the mansion, which is the center of piece of our talk tonight. Here it is again. We see that little cute balcony along the back there, right facing the servants' quarters, so that they could look out there. And we're going to talk about that when I go over the floor plans a little bit with you. So if you haven't had a chance to tour the mansion, and I would recommend that, we're open every first Sunday of every month, noon to 2 for tours, and somebody from our board will be there and will gladly give you a little tour of the place. And we'll show it off because we think it's kind of neat. And this is the first floor that you'll be able to have access to and still see. And it's quite a little place. My wife recently took some pictures, and this is what it looks like from the inside. Little stairwell going up to the second floor. To the right is a library, and that's in the library there that we have some board meetings at times and other things. Then there's a little office to the other side of the stairwell, and beautiful woodwork and glasswork and all of that. I should tell you that when the building got built, the cost was upwards of $50,000, or about 10 times the cost of an average single family house that was being built in Bozeman at the time. And they had a famous architect, and Fred Wilson. Richard Brown knows this well, I'm sure, that was able to assist in Charles Hare's. He was the main architect in his work, and he's a famous architect and has a lot of work all around Montana. And we'll tell you more about the woodwork and the blocks from Bridger and North Dakota and everywhere else when you have when you're on your tour. So that's the living room. Well, let's go to the second floor. And this is an interesting place. Now, you don't have access to this, so we'll have to just give you a little virtual tour today. And we're hopefully gonna get some action here on the second and third floor renovation. So we have all the little guys. We'll have a picture of the family here in a minute, and with their little nicknames. Everybody had a nickname, and I'm going to show you why that's important here in a minute too. And I'll call your attention to the servants' quarters in the back, because I've even done some research on those two. It was a mother and a daughter, Afro-Americans. She was 40, and the daughter was 21 in the 1920 census, where I picked this up. And I've done a little genealogy work through Ancestry.com, which I've also done for the whole Story family. And I'll tell you a little bit about that, because that helped a lot from doing this research, as well as Martha Drysdale's handwritten family tree that she was so kind to send Jane, and Jane passed it on to me, Jane Glockman, that is. And so I really appreciated that, and that helped me so much. But there's so many interesting stories here, and you true historians out there, if you ever want a research project, come see me. If it has to do anything with the Story family, or John Russell for that matter, I'm sure he's uncovered many things that he wishes he could have spent another umpteen years doing, because it is time consuming. But here's all the kids, and Willifred Pudd down there is the only kid that was born in the mansion. So they had 5 little kids running around in this place, in the mansion, and it was quite a home. Here's what the second floor looks like now, and we can talk about this a bit later, but it is ready for further development, fire suppression system, heating, insulation blown in. This is the main master bedroom that you saw on the blueprint, and it's and that's the third fireplace in the mansion too, I might add. This is the bathroom. This is pretty recent pictures, so I'm not trying to hide anything here. And this is the third floor. You might have heard that TB or Byron, he loved music. There's pictures of him playing the tuba in the Bozeman band, and he wrote in the Sweet Pea parade. He wrote a song for it. He loved music, so of course when he designed it, he had to have a ballroom and an orchestra pit. And this is some of the nicest areas, I think, that are ripe for a nice seminar room, or boardroom or something like this, or discussion, community resource area. And it's quite nice to read the old stories that, especially Malcolm Bynes, one of Bynes' son here, we'll see a picture of him, talks about the music that flowed out of the windows, and the couples dancing, and how the juniors were not allowed up there, and they had to listen to the Victrola. And it was just a different time. They had a small, you see that orchestra pit? There's reference to a small orchestra and a piano, and even four cornets that played in one of their parties. So this guy liked to live, had a little balance in his life, what the heck, So here's what it looks today, though. And those pipes above there, that's that fire suppression system, a sprinkler, as we have on the first floor. But of course, it's all exposed because this has not been further developed. Those holes in the wall, that's insulation. All the windows are sealed, good roof. So it's got really good bones. I really want to emphasize that. This room to the left, it's an old costume room, but it looks like something out of a castle in England or something. It's a neat little room, and I wish we could have access to that. But this has got really potential, I think. All right. Well, on the mansion's property is the carriage house, and this is the carriage house today. We could go into that here a little bit, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But again, many people on the board, past boards that I've been on the board for about 5 years, they always thought that this might be the first one to further develop the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. But we'll see about that. This is what the mansion looks like from a drone. Courtesy of the folks down in the city hall that let me take this. Here we have the L where the to the right along Wilson. That's the park, and then it goes along College, and that's got a 50-year easement with about 45 more years on it. And that does not include the mansion or the carriage house. And so that's an important element as well that we want to mention. Let's get back to Byron then. This is he, 5 years after he built the mansion, and he's in the flour mill, and he's branching out to, he's helped with other investors set up the pea cannery area down there. Byron had his finger in that, and wool and banking interest, and of course that flour mill. And there's the nice family. There's his wife, Kate Ferris. And we have all the kids there. Byron in the back row, he's 15 years old. There's Malcolm, who you may recognize a little bit. I've seen so much of him. I'm really familiar with him. And then here's Byron to the far right. Catherine, and she's 16 there. She would be married later in the mansion right before it is transferred. The ownership's transferred to SAE. In Little Virginia, she's 9 years old. Kate, and then there's little Winifred, who was born in the mansion, and she's about 4 years old in this picture. Now, I could spend an hour easily on the financial difficulties that Byron would face at this point of his life. He really stepped in the proverbial doo-doo on this thing. He got into the sheep right at the wrong time because the World War I was ending. He got stuck with stockpiles of it. He went into the pea industry and canned a heck of a lot of peas. The pea industry in the valley was important all the way up into the 30s before it was struck by a disease. But he went heavily in debt. Let me just put it to you that way. And boy, the creditors were on his back. And so by 1920, he had transferred ownership or title of the Story Mansion, the whole property, to Catherine Ferris, Catherine F. Story, for love and affection and $1. And so this was to avoid the creditors coming after him and taking his house. Clever move, and quite like the stories. But this would kind of seal the demise or of his wealth, even though at about the same time, and I've been reading this, it's just incredible. He also created the fairgrounds down there. He and with other investors and his brother Nelson Jr. Put up the Ellen Theater. So it's just incredible. It must have been a lot of turmoil, and the mansion then was um, was really, he was under a lot of pressure. And so by 1922-23, he sold the mansion to SAEs. And we'll talk about that. But before I go there, I wanted to tell you that it was a happy ending in a way. I don't know if you can see my cursor there. There's an arrow there. And there's Byron with his wife, Kate. And there's Catherine, the firstborn, 1898, I believe. And then there's Budge uh, and Malcolm, Virginia, and then Willifred. And this is in the early 30s. And so with the powers of Ancestry.com and with Martha Drysdale's family tree, I have got a bead on all of these characters, and they have lived interesting lives, a lot of ups and downs, just like TB. And I can tell you it is, it might be a burden to be rich. I don't know. I've never tried it myself, but uh, they certainly live an interesting life, and right from the get-go. And all the other siblings, very interesting background. We got an interesting family, but I've got to move on. And by 1924, according to the MSU yearbooks, it's called the Montanan, and I have to call out Dale Martin and Mark Huffsletter, who told me about this great resource, these old yearbooks. They're available online every year. You can just point and click, and you can have a blast. And you can find out what fraternities were on campus, what their houses look like, how many individuals a lot of times, sometimes not. But it's a good starting point. I really want to have a shout out to Dale and Mark, who are bona fide historians, not retired economists that with just a love of history. So they clued me in on this source, and I really appreciated that. And you can see the mansion there. It's kind of in the shade there, and that's the living room. You can recognize the fireplace and all of that. Now, Montanan was good. And like I told you earlier, we give tours, and I've given lots of tours, and I'll tell you what, I get more out of the tour than I probably give out. This fellow from Idaho Falls sent me this picture from 1925 when his grandfather was in the fraternity and had to shovel snow. So I want to give a shout out to the city who owns the building and does the snow shoveling and the mowing and the heating. I want to say I'm very grateful to you, and we'll try to help you out as much as we can on that. But it was a chore. This is from 1925. I'm going to go through these kind of fast. This is across the street, or 19. Yeah, that picture was 25. This is from 27, 28. This is across the street where Nelson, Bud, his older brother, had to sell his house or sold his house and transferred it to the Sigma Chi's. So we have the SAEs on one side, and we have the Sigma Chi's on kitty corner. Some more pictures. You're going to like these pictures, I hope. I got a kick out of it. And if you get a chance, if you got a laptop and you're watching, the basketball games, flip through some of this stuff. You won't get these kinds of pictures, but there's a lot of old pictures in there of sports and the fraternities. There were 8 fraternities and 2 sororities on Wilson, Grand, and Third at one time. I think by 1927, I read. And I just want to call your attention to the downspouts. I'm a downspout guy, and I'll tell you why later, why I'm interested in that. But there's a lot of fun pictures. I really appreciated. This was Brian Snow, and his grandfather was in the fraternity, and he was the brother of Max Worthington, who you might know or know the name of. Inside, they had formals, and Brian had went through his files back in Idaho Falls and sent me these. This is from the yearbook, 1934, I believe, and we can see in that lower one there with the kids lined up on the columns what the deal was, and that's a picture. It looks to me when I was trying to study and my undergraduate days in Minnesota, I did a lot of that. I guess I didn't do so good. Anyway, hey, this is from Brian Scott's time in the mansion in the 80s, and they had a Yellowstone Park, or it could have been a Glacier Park touring bus, and they had worked on it, and they kept it in a carriage house, and they would go to and from football games and go around the neighborhood, I guess, and scare the neighbors and do all kinds of weird things that young people are supposed to do when they're young. That's why they're in college. They're trying to get smart. So anyway, this is another picture that Brian sent about that time from probably up near the servants' quarters windows looking out towards Grand and College. That was a lot of fun. And I'm going to have to say goodbye to the SAEs. This is from the 1931 yearbook. I could not resist putting this in here. SAE Chariot. Oh, oh, oh. Talk about puns. All right. So let's go to the recent past. And I mean the last 20 years or so. And most of the people that were involved in this thing are still alive, and we need to better document it, because I've only had rough files down in the basement of the mansion that I've looked through, and as best as I can see, this is my take on it, and I'd leave it up to those people that were involved. Let's document that. Let's create some history, because we're all making history. We might not realize it. Okay, 2003. The city takes title of the property at a cost of $1.28 million. They buy it from the SAEs. Enrollment or membership and people living in the mansion had gone up. It was up to 60s in certain years, and it went down to 18. And just could not carry the cost of having people in that building. There's a period of time, it looks to me, about 4 years went by with a lot of potential buyers, offers. They just did not meet the criteria that was set up by the public in the city. About that time, concerned citizens got together, did a tremendous job, and did some serious exterior renovations, completed about $1 million. And of course, I'm a numbers guy, so I'll go into here a little bit. But again, if you need any more information on this stuff, please contact me. I have rough estimates, and I would love to know if you have any more information on it. By 2007, the commission again votes 4-1 to keep the mansion public, and so the next year the Friends of Story Mansion is created, or forerunner of it, and we have always kept that goal, is to keep the mansion public. I have gotten that drilled into my head from old past board members, and I think it's, well, we'll see what we can do with that. All right, I told you I'm a numbers guy. Just go through this quick. If you want more stuff on this stuff and where it came from and how they can see the city share here down at the bottom row, about in the middle, about 2.6 million. So I figured in my rough estimates, the city's got about 2.6 million sunk into this place. Now keep that in mind. I don't know if you're a numbers guy, but I'll bring that back to you in a minute. All right. So 2008 to 22, I came in, I've only been in Bozeman about 10 years, so I wasn't around, but I know that our Friends of the Story Mansion, that's FOSM, and the city have collaborated on several functions. At one time, Friends of Story Mansion, I see in the files, had 150 members, about 20 active ones that really were hopping. They did a lot of nice things. Organized annual events, which we still have, we still do when we can. Main one being the Story Under the Stars. Probably you're familiar with that. Halloween, that sort of thing. And the Parks and Rec department have been wonderful, and they've taken the lead on reservations and other programs and been very supportive of what we do, and we view ourselves as partners with this city. And before COVID, if you're interested, the city, what's this costing us as far as a deficit, as an annual deficit, annual rental revenue has fallen short about $3,000 to $6,000 per year before COVID. And the last 2 years here, it's ballooned to 20,000, a little bit over 20,000, because the rentals and the confined space just is not amenable under these conditions with COVID, with the precautions. And ongoing, I've told you, the city heats it, plows the snow and mows the grass, and we've had some repair bills, and we'll see some other things here where the budget deficits faced by the city and what's left over, it just has not permitted the necessary exterior upkeep and maintenance of the things that I think that it deserves. But we sure understand the city's situation, and we are trying our best to work around that stuff. Well, about 2008, no, I think this was before, when, boy, it got cleaned up nice, I think. That's top drawer job. That is so well done that there was a movie out here about that same time, the summer, what was it, this Plum Summer. And if you ever want to get that film, which we have done, it's not a great movie, but it's fun. There's Henry Winkler there. Can you see my cursor if you recognize that character there? And some of you may be in the picture up here. I've tried to see if I can recognize others, but I'm sure you probably are out there and you're saying, oh, I'm one of the cast members there. I might be an extra. But anyway, that was filmed in the mansion. Story about, well, it's a crazy story, but based on a true life story by someone in Billings. And 8 Rotten Tomatoes out of 10. So do not come back to me and tell me Spinelli recommended this movie and I'm gonna hit him with a Rotten Tomato. All right, so when you go through the mansion, you're gonna see some echoes of the past. And a lot of little kids, I show these to them, and other board members, when we give tours, we show them to them, and they say, what is this thing? Well, we got a central vacuum cleaning system in the mansion, and you wouldn't believe that what the kids come up with, what they think it is, but that's a fun part. Okay, now, in the closet on the first floor, we've got really something of historical significance. That panel back there was preserved by the SAEs when in '53, when they satisfied their 30-year mortgage. Kate came in, and and under the conditions in '23, when the mortgage is written up, could you please keep this as pristine, or respect the family's things as much as you can. And by God, that panel in there has got the growth charts of the kids. Now, I did not know who Budge was up until 2 weeks ago, when I got my Gallatin History Quarterly report, and there was a picture that I showed you of TB and his wife in the early 30s, and boy, they did a nice job, and they had the nicknames on there, and I said, wow, I'm going to go back, and that's, it's not Fudge, it's Budge. Oh, I know who that is. And MC, I know who that is. That's Malcolm Clemson. That was his middle name in 1920, and we have the whole family there. It's very, there's a rich history in this building, and thanks to Dale Martin. And I've noticed this down there for years. And Dale said, that's a Philadelphia and Reading, Pennsylvania railroad rail from 1880. Now I'll show you, that's holding up part of the basement ceiling, guys. So, and it's done a pretty good job, I'd say. But boy, that is amazing. Now, here's something from the SAEs, a door, and this oath that the members had to memorize, and then say if they could recite it by memory, they got a special pin. That 1856, that relates to the start of the Sigma Chi's down south where it originated from. Now this thing, I told you about the Sigma Chi's, and you're probably wondering, why in the heck do I care about? Well, there was a story, I've heard this over the years, and my neighbor, Ty Hill, noticed this when he helped us clean up after Christmas. This is an arrow in one of the beams downstairs. Now, here's the story I've heard. The SAEs hit golf balls kitty corner over to the other fraternity, the Sigma Chi's, and those guys would get ticked off, and they would shoot off arrows over college into the lawn, into the SAEs. I don't know if this is one of the arrows, but I never noticed it before until Ty pointed it out, and by God, it's down there. I did not put it in. I have a sense of humor, and I like to fool people, but I've got to keep this as factual as I can, or Crystal will never talk to me again. When you go out of the building, you'll see another remnant of SAE. It's still the paint when you go into that east side of the building. And the carriage house, this is the way it looks inside. It's a neat old building. It's got some really good potential for all kinds of things. And of course, if you're young and you don't know any better, or if you do know better, you got to have some relief from your all the pressures of college life, and maybe imbibe by some liquid refreshment from time to time. And we all grow up from some of that, or we have, some of us. Okay, so we're at the point here where, boy, what is next? What's next? What do we see in the future for the Story Mansion and the carriage house? Do we have an envision this ambitious? Boy, that would be neat. That would really be neat. I would love that, especially if it fills in a niche of community services in the educational, social, or cultural realm that complements what's going on in Bozeman right now. And it doesn't necessarily compete with it. Are there niches? Are there things that we could do and really latch onto it and then go out and try to get some funding for these things? Or could it wind up as that old dark house in these spooky movies? Well, I wonder, because I'm concerned. Now this is the front of the house I was showing you, where there was an old downspout that went off to the side and looked kind of weird, that downspout. And now we don't have one. Well, that gutter drips water and ice constantly in the winter, and there's about 5 inches of ice over this concrete column here over the years. I've got to show you pictures over the years, and it slowly is eroding those beautiful concrete railings going up, and as well as the stairs going up into the place. And the columns aren't looking very, very good, folks. It's not going to fall out, over anytime soon, but we need some serious work, not just a paint job. This could be another scenario. I'm not a proponent of that, but along Grand back in there where there's not the easement, who knows? So I want to leave you with some possibilities that, as the president right now, the one that's carrying on the tradition, and I have a great board as well. We're looking for cultural objectives, social objectives, educational objectives for this piece of property that fills a niche. And right now, maybe the carriage house we're looking at a community theater, playhouse perhaps, that would fill a niche for small productions. The mansion, could it serve as a true community center? That's what it's labeled at down in the city. It's a community center. Could it provide a social objectives, maybe a center for nonprofit organization outreach Who knows? It's wide open. Educational objective, I've often thought, because I like when the kids come in there and you see their eyes and they ask you questions on, did Native Americans live here, and this and that. Maybe it could be a living history center during the school year, and then in the winter or in the summer months. And we've had some board members just recent come on that had this idea, a writers workshop in the summer months of out-of-town writers or something, complement what's going on in Bozeman and add another dimension to what's already there. So it's wide open. We're looking for input. We're looking for folks that are interested. Stop by the mansion, look at our webpage. I'll show you the webpage down here. But first, I have to thank two wonderful people that have shared lots of stuff with me. For sure, Jane Glockman. She is a darling. She is just a star of Bozeman in my mind. Dee Dee Taylor shared a lot of what she had in her files. Rachel Phillips down at the Gallatin History Museum is another tremendous resource. Andy Eppel, who was a past president of the Friends of the Story Mansion for the last 10 years, he really carried on the fight to the struggle. And Dale Martin and Mark Hofstetter, I've already mentioned him. And of course, Crystal with her interesting, insightful events and all these tours. And some of them have started at the mansion. Richard Brown's been involved in that because we have so many interesting houses around where the mansion is. With the Extreme History Projects has done a wonderful job. So with that, I want to leave some time for questions that you may have, and I would be glad to respond to that. And if I mumble my way through it and you don't understand it, come on by and I can spend more time trying to struggle through it. But I'll turn it over to Crystal now, right? I'll turn control back over to you. There we go.
All right. Well, thanks, Felix. That was so interesting. And if folks have questions for Felix, you can write them in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, or even in the chat box at the bottom of the screen as well. And, maybe Felix, I'll just start the questions by asking, what do you think the value of the Story Mansion is today versus when the city purchased it? And has it been a good investment for the city?
Well, thank you so much. And, I had a bunch of 8th graders come through there last fall, and one of the kids, I swear he's going to be an economist when he grows up or something. That was his first question. And so I sort of anticipated that, and it's worth about this much at a minimum. This is a British Guiana magenta stamp. There's only one known in the world. And it's got auctioned last December for $8.6 million. One little piece of paper. So is that a value that, Crystal, you wouldn't pay $8 million for? Well, we could, right? But probably wouldn't spend 10 cents on this thing. But if you could turn around then and sell it for $9 million, if you can get, well, anyway. So value and a price, what the market would bear, two different things. But I have looked at this thing as an economist, and I'll give you I'll range here. The current city appraisal as of yesterday was $4.49 million. The land around the easement is 1.3, and the land around the carriage house and the mansion plus those buildings 3.1. 4.49 million. Now, Crystal, 2 years ago, when I looked into it, the total value of that parcel was, and I've got it here, 2.2 million. It's doubled in 2 years. One can make an argument that the city's made $1 million each year in the last 2 years. That's not a bad investment, but that's, okay. Let's look at what how others would view it. Past construction costs, I said $50,000. If you just looked at the inflation at that from that 1910 on, it's only worth 1.5 million. But who's just going to sit on money in the bank? They want to invest it, make money out of it. We'll go into some other deflators that I looked into. But if you look at that 10 times value of the average Bozeman house, and right now it's about $840,000. If you multiply that by 10, that would give you about what that price of that stamp just went to auction for. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't go for any, they'll give you a little range. Here's what I looked at as some inflators. Now, if you use the wage, this middle one, wage, income, and household expenditure measure, it gets into that 9.9 million. In the lower one, if the value of the mansion, its value back then at 50 grand, increased in the same proportion as the GDP output index did, it would be worth 35 million. Now, while we're talking about value and price, it all depends where you're sitting. And I sat the other day and I thought, let's see if an historian looked at this. And if you could describe 2 words that they would want to do, an economist, agriculture, the historians would say 2 words: cherish it. The economist would say value it. The developer would say doze it. The agriculturalist, and I'm an agricultural economist, we're stewards of our resources, I would say honor it. But as an economist, try to reuse it or repurpose it so we can defray some of these costs, but we keep a gem of an asset in our community. And if we were a member of the future generation, we would say these 2 words: not here. How are those people's preferences measured or entered into here? They aren't. And that's why economics is not a perfect solution to this kind of non-market problem. So thank you for that question, Crystal. That little kid had me on the spot, so I knew I was going to get this one.
You've got another question, Felix, and
Sure.
and that's from Clint. And he says, are there current living ancestors of the Story family living in Bozeman today? And you did great, Felix, he says. So any living ancestors of the Story family living in Bozeman today?
Sure. And I bought my snowblower from one of them. So let me tell you how he was related. Okay, we have Nelson, and then we have TB, and Malcolm. Okay, if you know Malcolm or have heard of him, he's that character there's a statue of him across the way from the county courthouse. Okay, so that's TB, and TB's son, and he had a daughter, Martha Drysdale, who I mentioned. She's a wonderful person, and her brother, is it her brother? Yeah, her brother is Bill, and he works down at Ace.
Or her son.
That's the son. Yeah. Excuse me, that's the son. There's so many doggone generations. I got about 6, 7 generations in my Ancestry.com thing. I'm going, wow, this guy, it's incredible. So yeah, and then there's a daughter. You probably know her name, and I believe she's a waitress now at the Western Cafe, and I have yet to meet her. I would love to meet her. And Clint, you raise a good point. I would love to have an event at the Story Mansion and have a family reunion. And boy, could the stories flow then. Ha, ha, ha.
And we unfortunately lost Martha Drysdale just a few months ago. She passed, yeah. And so it was hard to see her go. She was the matriarch of this family, of the Story family, here in Bozeman for sure. Okay, so any other questions? Does anyone have any other questions for Felix before we let him go here? Any other questions? If you have questions, you can put them in the question and answer box that's located at the bottom of the screen. Well, Felix, you might get away with not a lot of questions tonight. We don't have a questioning group this
Ah,
evening.
e- either that or they knew all about the story. They knew the whole story already. Uh,
So,
Again, that book
so
by John Russell is a good one. I highly recommend that as a starter. There's a number of books. I have them here. The Houses of Bozeman by Lee and Strand. If you're interested in art, buildings and stuff like that, they talk about all of the tremendous houses that we have here, the eclectic uh, types of houses, and we have there's just a number of good references. And of course, we have people like Crystal and others that have a lot of information, and they can steer us in a direction where it helps, and we can really get dangerous, I think.
so Felix, tell us again when the Story Mansion is open for tours.
Yeah, the first Sunday of every month,
Okay,
not noon to 2, we put a little
noon to
sandwich
2.
board out
Okay.
there, and please go to our web page. It's down there, and Julie's on and Paula, they're doing a wonderful job on our web page and social media, things like this that I'm not familiar with, but have sure grown our people that want to come in and help and hear about our events. So we are set to really move into an exciting period, I hope, working with the city, closely with the city and others. And we see ourselves as putting on events, as well as facilitating others to, partnering with them to do events, and then um, be a facilitator to find potentially anchor tenants or some other ways that we can reuse this property so it's not underutilized and it's not falling into disrepair. I
Right.
see a real concern there. And I hate
And
to
then,
leave it on a serious note, but that's the reality. And
right.
sometimes you have an expression for extreme history. Sometimes it's not what?
History isn't pretty.
Yeah. And so reality isn't pretty sometimes too.
Yeah.
And we've got to fight through that. And we always try to do that and make it a better world wherever we can, I hope.
And
And
so,
so,
Felix, there's also Historic Preservation Month is coming up in May. And you also have an event at the Story Mansion, a speaker coming in. What is the date on that? And do you know the speaker's name by any chance?
I know her first name, and I
Okay.
know she has an interesting book, which I've actually looked through, and I don't have it right on me. But let me tell you. Look at our webpage. In
Okay.
mid-April to early May, we have a very interesting group called the Random Acts of Silliness. So if I'm not silly enough for you, they will supply all the silliness that you can take. But they have a really interesting cabinets of curiosity that is going to be available for public tour, free admission, most every day. I think just Mondays would be a cleanup day, and that goes on for 2 or 3 weeks. And then in mid-May, about graduation weekend, unfortunately, but fortunately for us, we have a speaker, Catherine is named, from coming in from Seattle, and she is an expert on reuse, repurposing historical buildings. And so we're really interested to get her take on the Story Mansion and the Carriage House, and the city folks are going to help us give them a complete tour that is not usually available to public folks, and we can only take a small group through there. But we're real interested. And she's going to give a talk, I believe, on that Sunday at 3 o'clock.
It looks
So
like
we'll,
it's May 15th.
May 15th, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be great. And her name is Catherine Rogers Merlino.
Okay, there
So
you go.
yeah, thanks, Julie, for putting that in the chat there.
Oh,
And her expertise is adaptive reuse, sustainability, and preservation. So that's going to be great.
yeah, yeah. And I know Leslie is very interested in that area, if she's still on, about all the energy that's in these buildings and the economics of it. It's a very interesting book, and I hope Leslie for sure and others that have those interests can attend. It's just going to be a real nice
Yeah.
event.
So Felix, you have one more question from Daryl Todd, and he asks, is the house across the street a story mansion to the north?
To the north. No.
The street to the north? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, just hold on. I'll unplug these things and whoever Daryl is, I recommend this book and I'll return it back to the library tomorrow if you want to take it out. Is he in Bozeman?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Get this book out. Buy it. Get it out. Borrow it.
Yeah.
This book highlights many of the houses along Wilson. Like there's 25 of them in here.
Yeah.
And that book is in there. It's that one with it's College and Wilson going down towards the city, right? I always get yeah. And that's got a big write-up in here and the history of it. And Bruce Brown is the current owner now. We've met him. We try to get to know everyone in the close proximity of the mansion so we don't pull any surprises on them. We want to stay friends.
That's wonderful. Well, good. So Daryl is living in Big Timber, and Daryl's a she, and so thanks for that question, Daryl.
Yes.
That's
Sorry.
great.
Yeah. Okay.
And so good question. And so Felix, I think that is it. I think that's the last question we have. So let me just check one more time on the chat. Yep, that's it. And so thanks so much. Was there any last words before we close up for the night here?
Well, I just want to encourage people to come to the tour, visit our webpage, partake in some of our events as a participant or as an active member of our group. We're not going to suck you up into the board immediately, but we need all the members and support that we can possibly get. And if anything, it's not about money or it's about your ideas that you may bring in and what kinds of things that we could do to make this a more a vibrant community center serving the needs of the community and yet keep that historical bent there. When kids go by there, I was telling Crystal earlier, I had 2 high school kids go through there one Sunday. They didn't know anything about the stories, nothing, 0. And luckily I put the family pictures up and I go through the whole spiel. And it just seems to me a real failing, not because it's an esoteric subject, because it's part of our community. This family is really, their capital and their family really set up Bozeman to be the Bozeman it is today, if you like it or not. But they're really founding fathers and mothers, and if you have a historical bent and you want to get into it some more, I'm not kidding. I probably found 4 or 5 potential research projects that I think would be real interesting, from the number of fraternities and sororities and all the beautiful houses that they were housed in, and now people are living in there again. But you'll be surprised. Those 8 fraternities and 2 sororities that were there in 27, and then they migrated around. Interesting history and interesting people that came out of here. Dale and I think it was Dale Martin would love to know some of the fraternity members and SAEs and what became of them. Military, they served in the military. They're bankers. They're all sorts of folks that came in there, and they were enriched by this place and their experience here. And I just hope it serves a real vital purpose for the city and that it doesn't get overlooked. So please be more active, be proactive for history. How's that, Crystal?
That's perfect. Thanks so much, Felix. Yeah,
Uh,
it's such a great resource, and we have such a great opportunity with this house. So
well,
with this mansion. So, well, thank you so much, Felix, for all the information that you imparted tonight. We're so glad to have you on our lecture series, and encourage everybody to go to the Friends of the Story Mansion. And Felix, how can people get a hold of you if they need to get a hold of you? Can they go do that through the Friends of the Story Mansion website?
right.
Or
Yeah, yeah. You just
okay.
send in that deal and it'll bounce back to some of our board members and
Okay,
I'll get it for sure.
okay,
And I'd love to meet personally with people. I know I used to attend a lot of these presentations at the Museum of the Rockies, and when you can get up afterwards and you know, talk to the speaker and clarify things, ask questions, make comments. We all learn so much from that kind of interaction, and we have missed that out on that. And this is the best we can do. Hey, I'll take it for now. But
yeah,
please go to a tour and get more proactive on this stuff. I would love to see that.
yeah.
So thank you, Crystal,
All
for
right.
this opportunity. And we
Yeah,
all thank you from the board as well.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending this evening, and thank you again, Felix, and a good evening to everyone. Good
All
night.
right. Good night. Take care.